Bear down. Fam, Kansas City just put a trade offer on the table for Felix Anudike-Uzomah, and in a minute I'll break down why, per Bleacher Report, this deal might not be the pass rush fix Ryan Poles and the Bears really need. While the D-line is still the big question mark over at Halas Hall, the run game has zero doubts left. D'Andre Swift and Kyle Monangai just got ranked as a top 4 running back duo in the entire NFL, and there's a stat buried in there about Monangai that's going to blow your mind. And to close it out, Colston Loveland dropped a bombshell on a podcast revealing he was just 12 picks away from never putting on the navy and orange, and the name of the coach who almost snagged him first is going to leave you speechless. All that right now. Let's get into it, monsters of the Midway. Okay, fam, let's talk pass rush, because we have been talking about this for months, and it still is not fixed. And that still not fixed is literally today's story. Let's walk through how we got here. Last season, Chicago finished near the bottom of the league in pass rush categories. Sacks, pass rush win rate, pressure generated without extra blitzers. The Bears were near the worst of the league in almost all of it. That is not my opinion. That is the 2025 regular season on paper. And when that season ended, everybody, myself included on this channel, said the same thing. This roster needs a real edge rusher this offseason. So what did Ryan Poles do? Nothing. Zero. No impact free agent signing, no trade, no draft pick spent on the position. Here we are in mid-July, training camp right around the corner, and the edge rusher room is exactly the same question mark it was back in January. Montez Sweat is the #1 anchor, and after him, a giant question mark. Austin Booker has not proven he can be a 16-game starter. Dayo Odeyingbo is coming off a torn Achilles. Shamar Turner still has not returned from a torn ACL, and Dominique Robinson left in free agency. Fam, this is not depth, this is a bet. So why didn't they do anything? And here is something a lot of fans do not want to hear. Adam Schefter reported the Bears do not have the financial resources to take a real swing at Max Crosby from the Raiders. Read that again. The guy who would have solved this problem at the root, the elite pass rusher available on the market, was out of budget, period. Chicago is built around Caleb Williams' future contract, around the offensive line, around keeping cap flexibility for 2027. A pass rusher in Crosby's tier would have broken that balance. So if there is no money for the big swing, what is left? This is left. Bleacher Report, through Mo Moton, proposed a trade where Kansas City sends defensive end Felix Anudike-Uzomah to Chicago for a late 2027 draft pick. And I want to be completely honest about who this player is, because the name does not ring a bell for most of you, and rightfully so. Anudike-Uzomah was a first-round pick for the Chiefs in the 2023 draft out of Kansas State, where he had 2 genuinely dominant final seasons, 19.5 sacks and 25.5 tackles for loss over his college career. That is the kind of production that gets you drafted in round 1. The problem is, he landed on a Kansas City roster that was already stacked on the defensive line. Chris Jones, George Karlaftis as established starters, veterans like Charles Omenihu and Mike Dana behind them. There was no room. He barely played as a rookie in 2023. In 2024, he got more snaps, 2.5 sacks on 31% of the defensive downs, which honestly is not bad for a limited role. And in 2025, the entire season, he did not play a single down. He hurt his hamstring in August and spent the whole year on injured reserve. So here is what Chicago would be getting. A 24-year-old former first-round pick with 3 career sacks total, who has not played in almost 12 months in exchange for a pick that probably will not even make a roster. And here is where I have to be the one saying the uncomfortable truth. This does not fix anything. Mike Moretus at Sports Illustrated said it directly, and I completely agree with him. This trade would not move the needle. Anudike-Uzomah would be exactly the same kind of question mark we already have with Booker, with Odeyingbo, with Turner. Trading one question mark for another question mark is not progress. It is lateral movement. Now, why might Poles do it anyway? Because the cost is basically nothing. A late 2027 pick is couch cushion money, and Poles has a very clear pattern with these kinds of moves. Darrell Taylor, Chris Williams in 2024, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka last year, all of them arrived for late picks. All of them were low-risk bets on players with an unknown ceiling. Poles is not spending capital on these moves, he is spending patience, and on top of that, he has direct connections to the Chiefs organization, he has worked trades with them before, so the why not logic makes sense from a risk management standpoint, but here is my stance, and I am telling you straight, if this team genuinely wants to be a real contender in the NFC in 2026, it cannot keep solving its pass rush problem with couch cushion bets. I could be wrong, and honestly I hope I am, but my read is that Chicago is going to walk into the regular season with the exact same edge rusher uncertainty it had in January, just now with one more name added to the question mark list, and if Sweat gets hurt, or if none of the others step up, this defense is going to suffer the exact same pressure problems it suffered last year, no matter how many late picks they bring in. My conditional prediction is this: if Turner and Odeyingbo come back healthy from their ligament injuries before October, and if Booker takes a real jump jump in year 2, this room holds up fine without Anudiki Uzoma or anyone like him, but if either of those conditions fails, this becomes the number one topic of conversation again at the trade deadline, and this time Poles is going to have to spend a real pick, not a couch cushion one, and there's something else I want to put on the table, because I think it is the most revealing part of this whole situation. The fact that this is the only name connected to Chicago all week says more about the market than it does about the Bears themselves. There are no impact veterans rotating through rumors, no other general managers are calling Halas Hall offering mid to upper tier edge rushers. The July market, after most of free agency has closed and the draft has already passed, is a leftovers market. And in a leftovers market, what circulates is injured players, players stuck behind a loaded rotation, or players their own team has already decided are not worth keeping. Anudike Uzoma falls into that second category. That does not make him a bad player forever. It makes him a player without opportunities in the wrong spot. But it also does not automatically make him Chicago's answer. Beat reporters keep suggesting this roster is going to solve edge rush with real money in 2027, once the cap settles after Caleb Williams' extension. If that read is correct, then everything we are seeing in July of this year, including this trade proposal, is transition noise, patches, and patches fam do not win playoff games in January. And watch how this connects to what you just heard, because while the defense is still the unanswered question, this team's ground game stopped being a question a while ago, and this week the proof arrived in the form of a ranking. Matt Verderame at Sports Illustrated ranked DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai as the 4th best running back duo in the entire NFL, 4th out of 32 teams. And I want you to have the full context before anyone says only 4th, what a letdown, because this is not a letdown, it is confirmation of something we have been predicting since Ben Johnson arrived in Chicago. When Johnson got hired, the logical expectation was that the Bears would run the ball efficiently, because that is exactly how he built his offense in Detroit with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, and that expectation played out exactly as expected. Chicago finished with a top 3 rushing attack in the league, averaging over 140 yards per game. Swift had the year of his career, 1,087 rushing yards, his second ever 1,000-yard season, and 9 touchdowns. At this stage of his career, with the mileage on his legs, producing those numbers in the right system is the definition of a resurgence. But the stat that excites me the most is not Swift's, it is Monangai's, a 7th-round rookie who finished with 783 yards and 5 touchdowns in a complimentary role, and here's the number almost nobody is mentioning. No other running back who was the second leading rusher on his own team across the entire NFL had more yards than Monangai. Read that again. I am not comparing Monangai against other RB2s around the league and saying he was good. I am saying he was literally the best RB2 in the whole league in 2025. A 7th round pick. Listen to that. That is not system luck. That is a scouting evaluation that came out perfect. The duos that finished ahead of Chicago are not just anybody. Kieran Williams and Blake Corum in Los Angeles, who have one of the most complete offensive lines in the league, Rico Dowdle and Jalen Warren in Pittsburgh, Travis Etienne Jr. and Alvin Kamara in New Orleans, 2 veterans with Pro Bowl resumes. Losing out to those 3 names is not embarrassing, that is elite company, and honestly, I would not be surprised if by the second half of the season, if Caleb Williams keeps developing the way people expect, this duo climbs that ranking before the year is over, and that is the real connection to Caleb Williams for 2026. The team's stated goal is for him to become the first quarterback in franchise history to throw for 4,000 yards in a season. Think about what that means tactically. If Williams starts stretching the field with more consistency, safeties can no longer stack the box to stop the run. That opens cleaner running lanes for Swift and for Monangai. That is Johnson's offense working exactly as designed. Pass game opening up run game protecting pass game, and the most interesting part of all of this is a front office decision a lot of fans criticized at the time. Chicago did not spend a single dollar or a single pick on running back this entire offseason. 0. No free agency, no draft, and at the time, some analysis called it a mistake not bringing in competition or an injury hedge. But looking at this ranking, the correct read is different. Poles and Johnson trusted what they already had, and that vote of confidence is now being validated publicly by people outside of Halas Hall. That is the exact opposite of what is happening at edge rusher, where the front office still has not found the answer. Look at the difference. In one position there was conviction and it worked, in the other there was indecision and it is still unresolved, and we cannot talk about this duo without mentioning the offensive line, because no running back produces 1,800 combined yards without people opening the hole in front of them. Chicago invested in that unit over the last 2 years, and that investment is now showing up in these 2 runners' numbers. It is not a coincidence that the same roster protecting Caleb Williams well is also creating clean space for Swift and Monangai. When the line works, the whole offense works, and that is exactly what separates a complete system from one that depends on a single star player to survive. Oh, and to close things out, something lighter, but it still carries its own weight for 2026. Colston Loveland went on the Bussin' with the Boys podcast this week with Taylor Lewin Cohen and Will Compton and shared something that changes the whole tone of his draft story. When the Bears took him with the 10th pick in the 2025 draft, the public reaction was mild surprise. Most analysts thought Tyler Warren out of Penn State was going to be the first tight end off the board that night, and it turns out Loveland thought the same thing about himself, but from a completely different angle. He did not think Chicago was going to be the one to pick him. "I was definitely surprised," Loveland said on the podcast. "In my head I was thinking no later than the Chargers. That is what I was thinking. So when they picked me up, I was definitely surprised. And here's the part I find most interesting about this whole story. His connection to Los Angeles was not a coincidence. His college coach at Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, now coaches the Chargers. And according to Loveland, Harbaugh personally told him during the pre-draft process, 'If you're there, we will grab you.' The Chargers were picking around number 22. So fam, this was 12 picks away from never happening. If Chicago had not pulled the trigger at 10, there is an entire universe where Colston Loveland ends up reunited with his college coach in Los Angeles, instead of being the centerpiece of Ben Johnson's offense in Chicago. And honestly, this what-if thing already burned me once with other picks on this roster, so I'm not going to speculate too much further in that direction. But I do want you to understand how close this was. Loveland also explained something about Ben Johnson's selection philosophy that confirms a pattern we had already noticed. Tight end technically was not the most urgent need on the roster in that draft, but Johnson took him anyway because his philosophy is to grab the best available player and then build the scheme around that talent afterward. That is valuable information heading into the 2027 draft, because it tells us Poles and Johnson are not rigidly tied to a positional need map. If the best player falls to their pick, they take him, regardless of whether that position already looked covered. And how did year one end for him? 58 catches, 713 yards, 6 touchdowns. A solid start, not an explosive one, but solid for a rookie tight end in his first NFL season. And with year 2 under Johnson's system, with more chemistry with Caleb Williams, with Sam Roush now behind him in the room competing for the second role, the real expectation for Loveland in 2026 is that he jumps from promising rookie to central weapon of the offense. Bear down, we almost ended with the Chargers regretting something that slipped through their hands again. And pay attention to this, because it connects straight back to the first story of this video. While the front office still has not solved the pass rush problem, at tight end, the philosophy of grabbing the best available talent already handed them an impact player at pick 10. That is the kind of conviction bet I would love to see replicated on the other side of the ball. And there you have it, fam. A roster that already knows exactly who it is at the offensive line and in the backfield, and a defense that is still searching for its identity through cheap bets. That is the real summary of this moment in the offseason. Conviction on one side, indecision on the other, and the 2026 season will probably come down to which one of those two sides wins the race first. And if you ask me personally, I would rather see patience with a purpose than panic dressed up as action. Bringing in Onudike Uzomah does not keep me up at night either way. It is a low-cost move that could work out or could end up meaning nothing at all. What actually worries me is October arriving, and this front office still not having spent real capital at the position that needs it most. That is where we truly find out whether Ryan Poles learned the lesson from last season. Bear down, if this video gave you something, drop a like, subscribe, and tell me down in the comments. If you had to pick just one, would you rather Poles spend a real pick on an actual edge rusher at the trade deadline, or do you trust Sweat and company to figure it out on their own? I want to read every single answer. See you in the next one.